The next series of images I'm going to show you indicate kind of the life cycle of a mid-latitude area of low pressure. What are the different stages, what are the different steps in its life cycle? You need to start out with a boundary between air masses. So here I have a stationary boundary. I've got cold air on one side, warm air on the other side, but the cold air isn't pushing into the warm air isn't pushing into the cold air, so I really don't have frontal movement. The front is pretty much stationary, hence the blue and red alternating key here. But what will happen is you'll get the jet stream to move across one of these stationary fronts, or at least move close to one of these stationary fronts, and that causes a weak area of low pressure to form. Now, areas of low pressure, they spin in a counterclockwise fashion in the northern hemisphere. So what tends to happen is this stationary front will get bent. The newly forming area of low pressure starts to push some of the warm air to the north, starts to push some of the cold air to the south, so you'll get a wave that forms on this front, and that wave, as it matures, will eventually cause warm air to push into the cold air fast enough that the stationary front is now classified as a warm front, and on the back side of the low you have that cold air that spins around. Remember, the counterclockwise motion around the low is going to push cold air into the warm air, so that stationary front now becomes a cold front moving to the south. Now they have the low drawn up here. Technically the low should probably be right here where the cold front and the warm front merge. It's just a small detail that I want you to take note of. As that low continues to spin around, like I said before, that cold front will catch up to the warm front. The cold fronts generally move faster than the warm fronts do, and you get an occluded front to form. When this happens, the low has begun to die. It has reached its mature stage and it's beginning to weaken. If I go back, you'll see here warm air, it can get sucked into the area of low pressure. Areas of low pressure like warm air because low pressure is rising motions. Okay, air that is going from the surface higher in the atmosphere. Well, warm air likes to rise. So as long as warm air is going into the low, is feeding into the low, air is going to continue to rise, and the low will either maintain strength or continue to strengthen. Once that cold air has wrapped around the low, warm air can't get to the low. The low is surrounded by cold air. Cold air doesn't like to rise. It likes to sink. It has a higher density. So that area of low pressure will tend to weaken at this point and continue here. Now what tends to happen is you might get another area of low pressure to develop at this triple point here. Sometimes it happens, sometimes it doesn't. You have to take note of what's happening higher in the atmosphere with the jet stream. This is a satellite picture of a very mature storm, kind of in its dying stages. If I go back here, you'll see there's an area of low pressure. The occluded front turns into a cold front, turns into a warm front, and if you look on here, the area of low pressure would be over here. The occluded front would come down through here. I'd probably have a warm front over in this direction, and you can see a very sharp contrast between cloudy, stormy weather here and very clear air here. This would be where my cold front is located, moving off in this direction here. Behind it, sinking air, leading to clear skies. Ahead of it, rising air in a very moist air mass. The air mass behind here is going to be drier. Okay, a cold front is the leading edge of cooler and drier air in this part of the world because that dry air is coming in off of a continent. So you can definitely see a stark contrast between the maritime tropical air ahead of the cold front and the continental polar air behind the cold front here. Here's a radar picture of a similar type of system. This is a different system because we're now talking about the central part of the United States, but the area of low pressure is probably centered in this area here. The occluded front comes down here, turns into a cold front. Notice this line of pretty intense thunderstorms across Louisiana and Mississippi associated with that cold front. And then there's an area of elongated precipitation in this direction. So my guess is the warm front is probably in this area here, moving to the northeast and then this precipitation is associated with cool air ahead of the warm front.